The black Maybach pulled away from Notre Dame as the last note of the cathedral bells faded into the Parisian drizzle. 1,000 white orchids floated on the surface of a sea of black umbrellas. Cameras flashed like lightning against the gray spring sky. The world was saying goodbye to Isabella Moreau, the woman who turned scent into a $40 billion religion, the empress of perfume, gone at 38. Julian Knight stood at the edge of the Moreau family crypt in perfect charcoal Tom Ford, one gloved hand pressed to his heart, eyes appropriately red-rimmed. He was beautiful in his grief. The reporters said so. The society widows sighed. Even the priest dabbed at his eyes. No one saw him smile when the last mourner turned away. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were counting down the days until you were gone? This is the story of a woman who refused to stay dead, and the husband who celebrated too soon. But what Julian didn't know was that someone was listening to every word. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you loved, hit that like button. This story is for you. And stick around, because what happens next will shock you. Julian waited until the final car disappeared down the Rue de Rivoli. The crowd thinned. The cameras packed up. The performance was over. He slipped into the back of his Maybach. The partition rose with a soft, mechanical whisper. He loosened his tie, exhaled like a man stepping out of a cage he had worn for far too long. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. She answered on the first ring. She's finally gone. His voice trembled, but not with sorrow. It's over, Lila. We did it. On the other end, Lila Sinclair laughed, low, victorious, the sound of champagne already uncorked. Tell me again, how much is mine now? Julian leaned back against the leather. All of it. Every bottle, every boutique, every chateau in Grasse, the villa in Cap Ferrat, the jet, the island in the Maldives. We leave for Necker next week. You'll never have to hide again. I want the emerald parure first. Her voice purred like silk dragged across broken glass. The one she wore to the Met. I want to wear it while you fuck me on her bed. Julian closed his eyes, savoring the image like aged wine. Tonight, midnight, bring the Krug rose. He killed the call and allowed himself one soft, exultant laugh, the sound a man makes when he has finally won. He never noticed the tiny drone hovering above the roof of the cathedral, its lens trained on his lips, recording every word. 50 feet below in the crypt's forgotten service corridor, Isabella Moreau removed her earpiece and smiled the way a wolf smiles when it hears the trap spring shut. Phase 1, complete. She touched the scar just beneath her collarbone. Thin, deliberate, still pink. The place where the fatal plane wreckage had supposedly torn her apart over the Ligurian Sea 3 weeks ago. The scar was real. The wreckage was not. Julian thought he had won. He had no idea the real storm was only beginning. 8 months earlier, the discovery had been almost insultingly simple. Isabella Moreau had been living what she thought was a perfect life. Her fragrance empire stretched across 6 continents. Her signature scent, L'Eternité, sold a bottle every 3 seconds somewhere in the world. She lived in a 19th century apartment on Avenue Montaigne with crown molding and baccarat chandeliers and a husband she had loved since they met at a charity gala in Monaco 10 years ago. At 38, she felt like she had everything a woman could want. That Tuesday night started like any other. Julian had showered after one of his late meetings at the George V. He always left his phone on the marble bathroom counter, screened down, like a man who had nothing to hide. Isabella was brushing her teeth, counting the hours until the board meeting in the morning, mentally reviewing the quarterly projections. The phone screen lit up. A single message preview. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Room 412. Don't make me wait, Daddy. The name above it. L with a heart emoji. Isabella stared at it for a long time, toothpaste foam dripping from her lip, her heart hammering against her ribs like something trying to escape. There had to be some mistake. This couldn't be meant for her husband, not Julian, not the man who told her every morning how lucky he was to wake up next to her, not the man who brought her coffee in bed and kissed her forehead and called her his North Star. But when she opened the thread, she found 642 days of conversations that made her sick to her stomach. Photos of a beautiful woman with long dark hair and green eyes. Pictures of expensive jewelry draped across bare collarbones. Hotel room photos with sheets tangled and champagne bottles empty. messages planning secret meetings in Mykonos, in Gstaad, in St. Barth's. This woman, whoever she was, talked about Julian like he belonged to her, like they were planning a future together, like Isabella didn't even exist. The worst part wasn't even the sex, it was the plans. "I'm tired of pretending," Lila had written 4 months ago. "When are you leaving her?" Julian had replied, "Soon, my love. She's been sick lately. The headaches, the nosebleeds. Doctors can't figure it out. Another year, maybe less, then everything will be ours." Isabella's hands started shaking. She scrolled further back, found more messages. Colder, more calculated. "She works too hard," Julian had written 6 months ago. "Doesn't take care of herself. People like her burn out. Heart attacks happen, strokes. And when they do, everything she built becomes mine, becomes ours." Lila had sent back a champagne emoji and a message. "I can't wait to be Mrs. Knight, the real one." Isabella walked very slowly to the toilet and threw up. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building a life together, 10 years of trusting him with everything, her heart, her body, her empire. And he had been counting down the days until she died. She sat on the cold marble floor and let herself cry for exactly 5 minutes. Then she wiped her face, stood up, looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was different, harder, clearer. She remembered the vitamins Julian had insisted she take every morning, hand-delivered in a crystal glass of fresh squeezed orange juice. How solicitous he had been, how worried when she mentioned the headaches, how he insisted on accompanying her to every doctor's appointment. The headaches that started 8 months ago, the nosebleeds that came out of nowhere, the fatigue that made her leave work early for the first time in her career. Isabella touched her reflection in the mirror. "He's poisoning me." The realization settled over her like ice water, slow, then all at once. She didn't confront Julian that night. She smiled when he came to bed, let him kiss her cheek, listened to him talk about his day. And when he fell asleep, she lay awake in the dark and planned. Can you imagine discovering the person who promised to love you forever was counting down your days? Drop a comment below if you'd want revenge, because what Isabella does next is legendary. The next morning, Isabella called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. She told Julian she had a migraine. He brought her tea and vitamins and kissed her forehead with such convincing concern she almost believed him herself. The moment his car pulled away from the building, she made a phone call. Lucien Valois agreed to meet her at a nondescript brasserie in the 17th arrondissement. He was 62 with silver hair and eyes that had seen things most people only had nightmares about. Ex-DGSE, France's external intelligence agency. Now he worked privately for people who needed problems to disappear. Isabella had used him once before when a competitor tried to steal her formulas. Lucien had resolved the situation so thoroughly the competitor moved to Argentina and never worked in fragrance again. He sat across from her in a corner booth, ordered an espresso, studied her face. "You look like someone who just found out the truth." Isabella slid her phone across the table. He spent 10 minutes reading through the messages between Julian and Lila. His expression never changed. When he finished, he slid the phone back. "What do you want?" "I want to disappear." Isabella's voice was steady. "I want Julian to think I'm dead long enough to prove what kind of man he really is. Then, I want to come back and use that evidence to destroy him completely." Lucien was quiet for a long moment. "You're sure? This will hurt people who love you. Your friends, your employees, your family. They'll mourn you, really mourn you. They'll forgive me when they understand why." He studied her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. He found none. "Then, we begin." Over the next 2 months, Isabella and Lucien built the plan piece by piece. They chose a plane crash because it was clean. No body meant no autopsy. No autopsy meant no inconvenient toxicology reports showing whatever Julian had been slipping into her morning orange juice. Isabella spent those weeks quietly moving assets. She rewrote her will to leave everything to Julian. Wanted him hungry, wanted him certain. She opened accounts in the Cayman Islands under her mother's maiden name, transferred 20 million euros in small increments that wouldn't trigger alerts. She installed cameras in every room of the Avenue Montaigne apartment, in the villa at Cap Ferrat, in the chateau in Provence. Lucien's team did the work, while Julian was traveling. tiny lenses hidden in smoke detectors and picture frames, and the eyes of decorative sculptures. She learned to forge Julian's signature so perfectly, even the bank couldn't tell the difference. Practiced for hours until her hand moved with muscle memory, and she let herself get sicker. She stopped secretly dumping the vitamins Julian gave her, started taking half doses instead, just enough to make the symptoms real. The headaches intensified. The nosebleeds came more frequently. She lost weight, developed dark circles under her eyes. Julian's concern grew more convincing. He held her hand at dinner parties, told everyone how frightened he was of losing her, made sure photographers captured him being the devoted husband. One night, she collapsed at a fashion week fitting, cameras everywhere, models screaming, Julian rushing to her side, the airlift to the American hospital, front page of Le Figaro. The next morning, Isabella watched him from her hospital bed as he played the terrified husband. He held her hand, stroked her hair, whispered that everything would be okay. She looked into his eyes and saw a man counting his inheritance. 2 months after that first phone call with Lucien, everything was ready. The morning of the flight to Sardinia, Isabella stood in the foyer of their apartment and took one last look around. The baccarat chandeliers, the 19th century moldings, the Rothko above the fireplace, the life she had built. Julian came down the stairs in his weekend casual, linen shirt, Tom Ford loafers. He looked like a man without a care in the world. "I'm going to miss you." He pulled her close. 3 days feels like forever. Isabella let herself lean into him, breathed in his cologne, felt his heartbeat against her cheek. She was saying goodbye, but not to the trip, to the man she thought he was, to the marriage that never really existed. "I love you." The words came out broken, real tears sliding down her cheeks. He kissed her forehead, tasted the salt. "I love you more." It was the first time in months she believed he meant it, not because he loved her, but because he loved what losing her would give him. The car arrived to take her to Le Bourget. Julian walked her to the door, kissed her one last time, waved as the Bentley pulled away. Isabella watched him in the rearview mirror until he disappeared. Then she took out her phone and texted Lucien, "I'm ready." The Gulfstream G650 took off from Le Bourget at 11:07 in the morning. Isabella sat in the cream leather seat and watched Paris disappear beneath the clouds. The pilot was one of Lucien's men, the co-pilot too. The flight attendant was ex-Mossad. At 11:42, 30 miles off the Côte d'Azur, the transponder went dark. The plane didn't crash. It landed at a private airstrip in Corsica that didn't officially exist. But the debris Lucien's team had scattered across the Ligurian Sea told a different story. Pieces of fuselage, with the correct registration number, a fuel slick, personal effects that would wash up on shore over the next week, Isabella's scarf, her sunglasses, her passport. By noon, the French Coast Guard had found the wreckage. By 12:30, the news networks had the story. By 1 o'clock, the world knew. Isabella Moreau was dead. Julian was having lunch at Alain Ducasse when they told him. 3 executives from the company, board members who looked genuinely devastated. They found him at his usual table, approached carefully, delivered the news like men handling explosives. Julian's face went white. His fork clattered to the plate. He stood up so fast, his chair fell backward. No, that's not. She can't be. He collapsed right there in the restaurant. Cameras captured it. His body folding like something cut from strings. The paramedics arriving. The oxygen mask. The stretcher. It played on every news channel from CNN to France 2. The devoted husband destroyed by loss. For 7 days, Julian played his part flawlessly. He sat in the apartment dressed in black cashmere, refused food, refused visitors, stared at photos of Isabella with hollow eyes that convinced everyone his heart was shattered. The memorial service at Notre Dame brought out everyone who mattered. Designers, celebrities, politicians, 1,000 people who wanted to pay respects to the woman who made beauty a science. Julian stood beside the empty coffin. There was no body to bury, just a symbolic casket filled with white orchids. He gave a eulogy that made grown men cry, talked about how she was his North Star, how he would never love again, how the light had gone out of his world. The cameras loved him, grieving and beautiful and broken. On the 8th day, he drove to Lila Sinclair's apartment in the 16th. She opened the door in a silk robe, hair wet from the shower, smile like Christmas morning. He walked in without a word, grabbed her, kissed her like a drowning man finding air. They fucked on the kitchen island while the caterers from the memorial service were still cleaning up the condolence casseroles in his apartment across town. Afterward, Lila opened a bottle of Dom Perignon. They drank it in bed, naked and laughing. I can't believe it actually happened. She traced patterns on his chest. You're free. We're free. Julian kissed her forehead. I know. It feels like a dream. When can I move in? She sat up, eyes bright with plans. I've been looking at designers. I want to redo everything. New furniture, new art. That Rothko has to go. And the bedroom. God, Julian, that bedroom is so her. I need it to be ours. Soon. He pulled her back down. Let's just be careful for a few weeks. Let things settle. Then you can change whatever you want. Lila pouted but nodded. And the company? When do you take over officially? The lawyers say the will is clear. Everything goes to me as her surviving spouse. The business, the properties, the accounts. They're processing it now. How much? Her voice dropped to a whisper, like saying the number too loud might make it disappear. $40 billion. Give or take. Julian said it slowly, letting each word settle. Plus the real estate, the art collection, the jewelry, all of it. Ours. Lila screamed, actually screamed with joy, jumped on the bed like a child. Julian laughed, pulled her down. They made love again, slower this time, celebrating. Neither of them noticed the camera hidden in the smoke detector, or the microphone in the lamp base, or the fact that every word they said was being recorded and sent in real time to a stone farmhouse in Corsica. Isabella just erased herself from existence to expose the truth. If you're hooked on this story, smash that subscribe button, because the revenge is just getting started. The farmhouse sat in the hills above Porto Vecchio, surrounded by macchia that smelled like rosemary and immortelle and wild thyme. Stone walls 2 feet thick, terracotta roof, shutters painted the blue of the Mediterranean. It looked like a place where nothing ever happened. Inside, Isabella watched her husband celebrate her death on 6 different screens. Lucien had set up the surveillance room in what used to be the wine cellar. Banks of monitors, satellite feeds, encrypted connections. Everything Julian and Lila did in the apartment was captured. Every room, every conversation, every moment they thought they were alone. Isabella sat in a leather chair with a glass of Chateau d'Yquem and watched her life being dismantled. She watched Julian open the safe in her study, the one hidden behind the Monet. He knew the combination because she had trusted him with everything. He photographed the new will, the one that left everything to him, sent the photos to his lawyer with instructions to expedite probate. She watched him access her business accounts, transfer 5 million euros to an account in the Caymans. He did it from her own computer, using passwords he had stolen months ago. The transfer was marked consulting fee, untraceable, or so he thought. She watched Lila try on her clothes, her Chanel jackets, her Dior gowns, her vintage Hermes scarves. Lila stood in front of Isabella's mirror and posed, practiced being Mrs. Knight, practiced being the woman who owned everything. She watched them have sex in her bed, on her fret sheets. Lila wearing the emerald parure Isabella had worn to the Met Gala, the one that cost $3 million, the one that had been a gift from the President of France. Every night, Isabella poured herself wine and watched. Every night, Lucien sent new files, bank records, text messages, video footage, the evidence mounted like stones in a wall, each piece carefully placed, each one damning. 3 weeks after the funeral, Lucien discovered something that changed everything. He knocked on the door to Isabella's bedroom at 2 a.m. She was still awake. She barely slept anymore. You need to see this. He showed her insurance policies, life insurance, taken out 6 months earlier, 200 million euros. Julian was listed as the sole beneficiary. The applications were dated 2 weeks after Isabella's first nosebleed, 2 weeks after Julian had started poisoning her in earnest. There was more. Lucien spread documents across the dining table, medical records that had been altered, prescriptions for medications. Isabella never took a consultation with a cardiologist that Julian had scheduled under Isabella's name, notes suggesting she had a pre-existing heart condition. He was building a narrative. Lucien's voice was flat, professional. If you had actually died, if it had been a real heart attack or stroke, everything would have pointed to natural causes. A tragic loss, a young woman who worked too hard, and Julian would have walked away with 200 million euros, plus your entire estate. Isabella studied the documents with a strange, detached calm. How long has he been planning this? At least a year, probably longer. The insurance policies, the medical records, the poison, it's all premeditated. And look at this. He showed her text messages between Julian and Lila from 8 months ago, before Isabella had even found the first texts. Before she knew anything was wrong, Julian had written, "Don't worry, baby. This will all be over soon. She works too hard, doesn't take care of herself. People like her have heart attacks all the time, and then everything will be ours." Lila had responded, "I can't wait. I'm tired of hiding. I want to be Mrs. Knight already. I want to sleep in her bed and wear her jewels and spend her money. Hurry up." Isabella read the messages 3 times. Then she looked up at Lucien. Were they planning to kill me? It's possible they were waiting for the poison to work, or for you to have an actual medical emergency. Either way, his expression was grim. They wanted you dead, and they wanted to profit from it. Isabella stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Corsican night was black and full of stars. She could hear the sea in the distance, waves against rocks. Constant, relentless. How much evidence do we have now? Everything. Financial records showing 800,000 euros stolen over 3 years. Video of him accessing your accounts after your death. Audio of him and Lila celebrating. Text messages showing premeditation. The insurance fraud. All of it. Is it enough? Lucien nodded. Enough to put him in prison for 20 years. Maybe more. Isabella touched the window glass, cold against her palm. Then, it's time. Time for what? Time to come back from the dead. The memorial gala was scheduled for exactly 30 days after the crash, 1 month to the day since the world lost Isabella Moreau. Julian had organized it himself, claimed he wanted to honor her legacy properly. Really, he wanted to cement his position as her grieving widower and the new head of her empire. He spared no expense. The Grand Palais was transformed into a cathedral of glass and white orchids. 3,000 flowers flown in from Ecuador. Crystal chandeliers brought from the chateau in Provence. A string quartet playing Fauré's Requiem as guests arrived. 1,000 people came. Royalty, movie stars, titans of industry. They filled the grand hall in black tie and diamonds. Came to pay respects to the woman who had bottled desire itself, who had turned chemistry into art, who had built an empire from scent and ambition. The program was elegant. Speeches from business partners, a performance by a famous soprano, a video montage of Isabella's life set to Debussy, her childhood in Grasse, her first perfume launch, her wedding to Julian, red carpets and fashion shows and magazine covers, a life that looked perfect from the outside. Julian stood on the dais in midnight blue velvet. Tom Ford, custom made. He looked like a man carved from sorrow. When he spoke, his voice broke in all the right places. My wife Isabella was the most extraordinary person I have ever known. She was brilliant, driven, generous. She built something beautiful and lasting. But more than that, he paused, pressed his hand to his heart. She built a beautiful life with me. Our marriage was, his voice cracked. It was everything, and I will never love again. She was my North Star, and now the sky is dark. Women in the audience wept. Men cleared their throats against emotion. Even people who knew Isabella only professionally felt the weight of the loss. Behind Julian, the massive screens showed photographs. Isabella laughing on the deck of their yacht in Capri. Isabella accepting an award in Tokyo. Isabella and Julian dancing at their wedding, young and beautiful and in love. The lights dimmed for the final video tribute. The screens glowed white. Music swelled. Everyone watched. Tissues out. Hearts heavy. Then the screens went black. For 3 seconds there was only darkness and confused murmuring. People looked around, checked if it was a technical problem. waited for the video to resume. Instead, audio crackled through the speakers. A man's voice, familiar, intimate. "She's finally gone. It's over, Lila. We did it." The crowd went still, confused. That sounded like. The screens lit up again, split down the middle. On the left side, video footage. Julian and Lila in Isabella's apartment. The one on Avenue Montaigne. Everyone recognized the Rothko on the wall, the baccarat chandelier. Julian was kissing a woman who was definitely not his dead wife, his hands in her hair, her legs wrapped around him. They were on the kitchen island, the same kitchen where Isabella had hosted charity dinners and Christmas parties. On the right side of the screen, text messages appeared, large enough for everyone in the room to read. "Lila, I can't wait to celebrate. When can I move into the mansion?" Julian, "Soon, my love. All of her money, her company, her houses, everything is mine now. Lila, our money now. Don't forget about our plans. The penthouse in Miami, the trip to Europe, the wedding we've been talking about." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone screamed. People stood up, confused, horrified, not understanding but understanding too well. The video continued. Different footage now. Julian and Lila drinking champagne, laughing, toasting. He lifted his glass to freedom, to finally being rid of her, to the rest of our lives. The Grand Palais erupted, shouting, crying, rage moving through the crowd like fire. People looked at Julian on the dais. His face had gone white, bloodless. He gestured frantically at the technical crew, mouthing words. "Turn it off. Stop this. Now." But the technical crew had no control. The system had been overridden remotely. Lucian's work. The video kept playing. More footage. Bank transfers displayed in clean columns. 5 million euros. 10 million. 20. Account numbers. Dates. All after Isabella's death. All moved from her business to offshore accounts in Julian's name. Then the insurance policies. 200 million euros. Beneficiary, Julian Knight. Application dated 6 months before Isabella's death. Finally, the text messages that made everyone in that room understand exactly what they were watching. Julian, 8 months ago. "Don't worry, baby. This will all be over soon. She works too hard. Doesn't take care of herself. People like her have heart attacks all the time. And then everything will be ours. Lila, I can't wait. I'm tired of hiding. I want to be Mrs. Knight already." The screens went dark. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then chaos. People screaming, shouting, security trying to restore order, journalists on their phones calling their editors, photographers rushing toward the dais, everyone trying to process what they just witnessed. Someone in the crowd yelled, "Murderer." Others took up the chant, "Murderer, murderer, murderer." Julian tried to speak, held up his hands, opened his mouth, but his voice was drowned out by rage. Someone threw a program at him, then a champagne flute. It shattered against his perfect face. Blood bloomed bright against his cheekbone. Security guards moved in, surrounded him, started escorting him toward the back exit. People pushed forward, trying to get to him, wanting answers, wanting blood. Julian stumbled, looked back at the crowd, at the faces twisted with disgust, at the world that had loved him 5 minutes ago now baying for his destruction. Then, the main doors of the Grand Palais opened. Every head turned. Cameras swiveled. The shouting died down to whispers, and then to nothing. A woman walked down the center aisle. She wore white, a simple column dress, the same one she had worn the night Julian proposed in Venice 10 years ago. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders. No jewelry, no makeup, just her face, alive, real, impossible. Isabella Moreau walked through a sea of people who thought she was dead. Her heels clicked against marble, the only sound in the entire hall. One step, then another, eyes forward, spine straight. Every inch the Empress they remembered. People gasped, cried out. Someone fainted. Cameras flashed like 1,000 lightning strikes. But Isabella didn't look at them. She looked only at the stage, at the man being held by security, at her husband. She stopped 10 feet from the dais. The lights came up, bright, unforgiving. Every camera in the room trained on her face. "Hello, darling." Her voice was soft, almost gentle. It carried through the speakers, through the silence, through the shock that held everyone frozen. Julian made a sound, something between a sob and a scream. Animal, inhuman. He tried to move toward her. Security held him back. He stared at her like she was a ghost, like his mind was breaking in real time. Isabella climbed the steps, slowly, each one deliberate. She moved like a woman who had all the time in the world. When she reached the top, she stood eye to eye with him, close enough to touch, close enough to see the terror in his eyes. "You look surprised." She tilted her head. "Did you really think I'd let you keep what was mine?" Julian's mouth opened, closed. No words came out. His face was white. The blood from the champagne flute cut stark against his skin. He looked like he was about to collapse. Isabella leaned in, her lips almost touching his ear. The microphone didn't catch what she said next. Only Julian heard it. "I loved you. That was my only crime." Then she turned to face the crowd. 1,000 people staring, waiting, needing to understand. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice was clear, strong, the voice of a woman who built empires. "My husband has something he'd like to confess." She gestured to him, opened her hand, inviting him to speak, to explain, to try. Julian dropped to his knees. The cameras loved it. The flash of bulbs, the whir of shutters, the moment captured from every angle. The man who thought he had everything, kneeling before the woman he tried to erase. Isabella just rose from the grave and destroyed the man who tried to bury her. If this is the kind of justice you live for, drop a comment saying resurrection and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. The police arrived within minutes. They had been waiting outside, coordinated with Lucien, ready for the exact right moment. They walked through the crowd in crisp uniforms, handcuffs ready. "Julian Knight, you're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit theft." They read him his rights as they cuffed him. He didn't resist, couldn't. He looked like a man whose reality had shattered, like he couldn't quite process that Isabella was real, standing there, alive, destroying him. As they led him away, he looked back at her one last time, searched her face for something, mercy, maybe, or an explanation, some sign that this was a nightmare he would wake from. Isabella's expression didn't change. She watched him go with the same calm she might watch rainfall. When he disappeared through the doors, she turned back to the crowd. "I faked my death to uncover the truth." Her words were measured, precise. "Everything you saw in that video is real. Julian Knight has been stealing from me for years, poisoning me, planning my death so he could inherit my life. Well," she smiled, thin and cold, "I'm very much alive, and I'm here to take back everything that belongs to me." The crowd erupted again, but this time with applause, with cheers, with the kind of vindication people feel when they watch justice served hot and public and undeniable. That night, Isabella sat in a suite at the Ritz, the same hotel where she had spent her wedding night. Lucien was there, Amanda Foster, her business partner and best friend, a lawyer, a publicist managing the media firestorm, everyone working to put her life back together. The news coverage was wall to wall, every channel, every website. The woman who faked her death to expose her husband's crimes, the billionaire who came back from the grave, the revenge that shocked the world. Isabella watched it all with a glass of wine and a strange sense of distance, like she was watching someone else's life, someone else's pain. Amanda sat beside her, put a hand on her shoulder. "How do you feel?" Isabella considered the question, tired, angry, relieved, empty. She looked at her friend, all of it at once. "You know people are going to judge you for this. The deception, the public humiliation. Some will say you went too far. Let them." Isabella's voice was quiet. "They didn't watch him poison me for months. They didn't read him planning my death with his mistress. They didn't lose 10 years to a man who saw them as an investment. I know." Amanda squeezed her hand. "For what it's worth, I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." The trial took 6 months. It was the most publicized case in French history. Every day brought new revelations. Forensic accountants traced 800,000 euros stolen over 3 years. Toxicology experts testified about the slow-acting poison Julian had used. Arsenic, Small doses, just enough to cause symptoms that looked like stress or overwork. Lila Sinclair was found 3 weeks after the gala. She had fled to Thailand with nothing but a suitcase full of clothes, tried to disappear into the expat community in Phuket, but her face was too famous. Someone recognized her, called the authorities. She was extradited back to France to face charges as an accomplice. The evidence was overwhelming. Video, audio, financial records, text messages. Lucien and Isabella had built a case so thorough there was no room for doubt, no space for Julian's lawyers to maneuver. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Julian was sentenced to 25 years in La Santé prison. Lila got 7 years as an accessory. The judge called it one of the most calculated betrayals she had seen in her career. Said Julian had turned marriage into a murder plot, trust into theft, love into a long con. Isabella sat in the courtroom and felt nothing, no satisfaction, no relief, just the quiet certainty that it was over. The divorce was finalized the same day as the criminal sentencing. The judge granted Isabella's petition in full. Julian received nothing, no property, no money, no assets. He was ordered to repay every euro he had stolen with interest, which was impossible from a prison cell. But the judgment stood, a legal acknowledgement of exactly what he had done. Isabella walked out of the courthouse into a wall of cameras and questions. She had prepared a statement. Read it calmly. This was never about revenge. It was about justice. Julian Knight married me to access my wealth, spent years stealing from me, poisoned me, planned my death. The fact that he celebrated what he thought was my death tells you everything you need to know about his character. I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth, and I'm grateful to be alive to see it. A reporter shouted, "Do you regret the way you exposed him? The deception?" Isabella looked directly into the camera. "I regret that I had to do it. I wish I could have trusted my husband to be honest with me. But when someone is killing you slowly and lying to your face every day, extraordinary measures are necessary to uncover the truth." She got into her car. Lucien drove her away from the courthouse, away from the cameras, away from the life that had imploded and rebuilt itself into something different. "Where to?" he asked. "Home." She sold the apartment on Avenue Montaigne. Couldn't live in a space where Julian had planned her death, where Lila had tried on her life like a costume. She sold the villa at Cap Ferrat, sold the yacht, sold the jet, liquidated everything that carried the weight of betrayal. She kept only the chateau in Grasse, the place where her grandmother had built the first perfume laboratory in 1947, where the formulas were created, where the real work happened, the place that smelled like jasmine and roses and heritage. Isabella moved there permanently, stepped back from the public face of the company, let younger executives take over the runway shows and the celebrity endorsements. She focused on creation, on the chemistry, on the art that had made her fall in love with fragrance in the first place. 1 year after her resurrection, she launched a new perfume. She worked on it for months, refining, adjusting, getting it exactly right. The scent told a story. Sharp citrus at the top, bergamot and grapefruit, the shock of discovery, middle notes of jasmine, and tuberose, beauty and pain intertwined, base notes of amber and oud, warm, grounded, free. She called it Resurrection. The campaign was simple, a single image. Isabella standing in the lavender fields of grass, barefoot, hair loose, face turned toward the sun. The tagline, "For women who refuse to stay buried." It sold out in 4 minutes, crashed the website, created a waiting list of 200,000 people. Not because of the scandal, not because of the story, but because the perfume itself was a masterpiece. Critics called it the best fragrance of the decade, a scent that captured transformation, loss, rebirth. Isabella didn't do press for it, didn't give interviews. Let the perfume speak for itself. She spent her days in the laboratory, her evenings walking the lavender fields, her nights on the terrace with a glass of champagne and the sunset painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Amanda visited often, brought news from Paris, updates on the company, but mostly just sat with her friend, drank wine, talked about everything and nothing. "Do you ever think about him?" Amanda asked one evening. They were watching the sun sink behind the hills. The air smelled like immortelle and warm stone. Sometimes, Isabella sipped her champagne, I think about the man I thought he was, the one I fell in love with, and I mourn that person, even though he never really existed. Do you think you'll ever trust someone again? Isabella was quiet for a long time. Maybe, someday, but I'll never be naive again. I'll never give someone the power to destroy me. The old me would have called that sad. The new me calls it survival. I think it's wisdom. Isabella smiled. Maybe it's both. Somewhere in Paris, in a gray cell in Lausanne prison, Julian Knight learned what it meant to be owned by someone else, to have no control, no freedom, no future worth imagining. Every day the same, every night haunted by the memory of Isabella walking down that aisle, alive, avenging, unstoppable. He wrote her letters, dozens of them, begging for forgiveness, trying to explain, claiming he had loved her in his own way, that he had been weak, confused, that Lila had manipulated him. Isabella never opened them, had them sent directly to her lawyer, filed away as evidence in case he ever tried to appeal. She didn't need his explanations, didn't want his apologies. He was a chapter that had closed, a lesson learned, nothing more. On the second anniversary of her resurrection, Isabella stood on the terrace of the chateau at sunset, barefoot in the lavender, glass of champagne in her hand. The sky was burning orange and pink and gold. The air was warm. The world smelled like summer and possibility. She thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, the one who trusted blindly, who loved completely, who built her identity around a marriage that was a lie. That woman had died, really died, not in a plane crash over the Mediterranean, but in a bathroom with toothpaste foam on her lip, reading texts that shattered her reality. The woman standing in the lavender was someone different, harder, wiser, freer. Isabella raised her glass to the horizon, to the women who refused to stay buried. She drank. The champagne was cold and perfect, bubbles bright on her tongue. For the first time in 10 years, the future didn't taste like poison. It tasted like freedom, like lavender and amber, and the sweet sharp edge of a life reclaimed. And Isabella Moreau, alive, avenging, unbreakable, smiled at the setting sun and knew that some ghosts don't stay buried. Some women rise, and when they do, the whole world watches.